Hello, my name is David, 40 years old, currently living in Texas. I was once called a successful entrepreneur in one of the largest and most populous states in America. The mansion worth over $10 million stands as proof of that, the greatest source of pride in my assets. The house sits majestically in the suburbs of Dallas with pristine white walls, a red-tiled roof in the Spanish style, and a sprawling garden shaded by ancient oak trees. 10 years ago, when I signed the papers to buy this house, I thought it would be the place to hold all my dreams. A happy family, a loving wife, and a son growing up in safety and abundance. But now, standing in the vast living room, watching sunlight dance through the enormous glass windows, I feel only a chilling emptiness spreading in my chest. Everything seems to be slipping through my fingers like dry sand sifting through the gaps. I used to be a confident man, always flashing a victorious smile whenever I closed a $1 million deal. The software company I built from scratch had propelled me to the top with glowing articles, firm handshakes from major partners, and admiring glances from friends. I thought I was invincible. But now, my business is plummeting. Old partners are turning their backs, major clients are pulling their investments, and the glaring red numbers on the balance sheet feel like daggers cutting into my pride. I've had to fly everywhere, from New York to California, even to Europe, in search of opportunities to salvage things. Each business trip takes me further away from my family, from Laura and Ethan, leaving them in the grand but increasingly empty mansion. Laura, the woman I married 11 years ago, was once the light of my life. She was beautiful, sharp-witted, with golden blonde hair and a smile that made me forget all my exhaustion. I still remember the moment she held my hand under the sunset on Galveston Beach when I knelt down to propose and she cried, embracing me, promising to stay by my side no matter what. But now, that light seems to have faded. Laura has changed. She's no longer the gentle woman who used to sit beside me, listening to me talk about my grand dreams. Instead, there are cold glances, curt responses, and sometimes thinly veiled disdain. "You're always just complaining," she said, her voice icy one evening when I returned from Chicago, so exhausted I could barely stand. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she was just stressed because I was away so often. But deep down, I felt an unnamed unease. Something was cracking between us, and I didn't dare face it. Ethan, our 10-year-old son, is the only reason I haven't collapsed. He's smart, perceptive, with bright eyes that seem to see through the world. Ethan takes after me, from his curly hair to the way he purses his lips when thinking, but his eyes carry Laura's depth and emotion. Every time I look at Ethan, I feel both pride and guilt. I've missed too many of his moments. His basketball games at school, his piano recitals, the times he needed his father by his side. Each time I return from a trip, he runs into my arms, hugging me tightly as if afraid I'll disappear. But even Ethan, with his keen sensitivity, has started to sense the changes in our family. It was an early autumn morning, the Texas air unusually cool. I sat at the dining table, my coffee long gone cold, watching Ethan focus on his homework. His brows furrowed in concentration, so intense I didn't want to disturb him. The expansive kitchen with its gleaming granite countertops and state-of-the-art appliances used to be where Laura and I cooked together, laughing and joking. Now it was filled with silence. Laura had left early, saying she was meeting a friend. I didn't ask further, though a flicker of suspicion stirred in me. She'd been going out often, dressed more elegantly than usual, even when staying home. "Dad, are you going somewhere again today?" Ethan looked up, his voice clear but tinged with worry. I smiled, trying to hide my fatigue. "This afternoon I have to fly to Seattle, son, but it's just a few days. I'll be back soon." Ethan nodded, but his eyes held a trace of sadness. "I want you to stay home longer. Mom, she's been really busy." I frowned, a sense of unease creeping in. "What's Mom been busy with?" He hesitated, then looked down at his book. She goes out a lot. She says she's meeting friends, but I don't know." His voice trailed off as if he was afraid to say more. Ethan's words made my heart skip a beat. Laura meeting friends? That wasn't unusual, but the way Ethan said it, his hesitation made me feel something was off. I wanted to ask more, but my phone buzzed, a call from a partner in Seattle. I stood, patting Ethan's shoulder. "I'll talk to Mom, okay? Now finish your homework, son." He nodded, but his eyes followed me as I left the room. I stepped outside to the garden where Ethan used to run and play with our dog, Max. This mansion, with all its grandeur, was once a symbol of my success. Now it felt like a gilded cage, trapping me and my family in a fragile illusion. I wondered, does Laura still love me like she used to? Is she hiding something from me? The flight to Seattle lasted 4 hours, but the unease inside me felt like it stretched for a lifetime. Sitting on the plane, looking out at the window, the drifting white clouds seemed to conceal a secret. I thought back to the early days of our marriage when Laura and I decorated the mansion together, when she held my hand and said this would be our forever home. But now those memories were shrouded in fog. Laura spoke less, smiled less, and every time I tried to start a conversation, she responded with short, clipped sentences as if I were a stranger. When the plane landed, I received a text from Laura, brief as usual. "Good luck on your trip. Don't come back late." No words of affection, no warmth. I held the phone, my fingers hovering over the screen, wanting to send something to pull her closer. But in the end, I only replied, "Thanks. I'll try." I didn't know what else to say. The days in Seattle passed in a blur of tense meetings. I tried to convince investors, presenting plans to revive the company, but their eyes were full of doubt. Every evening I returned to the hotel, collapsing onto the bed, my mind swirling with numbers, contracts, and images of Laura. I called Ethan every day, listening to him talk about school, about Max, but I didn't dare ask about Laura. I was afraid his answers would shatter the last bit of faith I had. I started noticing details I'd overlooked before. Laura had been wearing nicer dresses, spending more time on her makeup, even when just at home. The times she said she was meeting friends and came back late. The messages she hid, turning off her phone the moment I entered the room. Had I trusted her too much, or had I been too blind? Each night, lying in the cold hotel bed, I wondered if I was losing her, losing the family I'd sacrificed everything to build. The days in Seattle were drenched in relentless rain, the droplets streaking down the window like they were weeping on my behalf. In the evenings at the hotel, I sat in front of my laptop, but my mind wasn't on numbers or contracts. I thought of Laura, of her smile from years ago, and of the cold gaze she gave me now. I thought of Ethan, of the way he hesitated when he said his mother was always busy. Something was happening in my own home, and I, the father, the husband, was thousands of miles away. Then on a stormy night in Seattle, about 2 weeks after I'd left home, my phone buzzed in the middle of fragmented dreams. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. My heart pounded, a sense of dread making my hand tremble as I picked up. "Son, what's wrong?" "It's late," I said, my voice thick with worry. Ethan's voice was small, almost a whisper, as if he was afraid someone might overhear. "Dad, I need to tell you something important, but you have to promise not to tell Mom." I sat up straight, exhaustion vanishing. "I promise, son. Tell me, what's going on?" Ethan took a deep breath, then spoke, his voice trembling. "Mom has a friend, a man. He comes to the house when you're not here. I've seen Mom smile at him the way she used to smile at you, but I don't think he's just a friend." His words hit me like a knife through the heart. I tried to stay calm, but my blood surged, burning hot. "What are you saying? Who is this man? What did you see?" Ethan hesitated, as if struggling to find the right words. "He's tall, really tall. He has tattoos all over his arms, even on his neck. He stays at our house. Mom cooks for him. They sit in the living room laughing. Once I saw Mom hug him. I didn't want to believe it, but I think Mom's doing something wrong." I gripped the phone tightly, feeling like the world was crumbling around me. Laura, the woman I loved, the mother of my son, was bringing another man into our home? I wanted to scream, to deny it, but Ethan's small, certain voice made it impossible to ignore. "Do you know his name?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. I heard Mom call him Micah, Ethan replied. I don't know who he is, but I don't like him. He looks at me like I'm bothering him. Micah. The name pierced my mind like a needle. I'd never heard Laura mention anyone named Micah. I tried to picture him, a tall man covered in tattoos showing up at my house when I was gone. Each image in my head was like a fresh cut, raw and painful. But I didn't want Ethan to be scared. He'd been brave enough to tell me, and I had to protect him. Thank you for telling me, Ethan, I said, my voice hoarse. Son, from now on, be careful, okay? Don't say anything to Mom, and if you see anything strange, text me right away. I'll come home as soon as I can. When will you be back? Ethan asked, his voice full of hope but tinged with fear. I'll try to be home in a few days, I promise. You stay safe, okay? Ethan nodded through the screen, his eyes glistening with tears. I want you home, he whispered, then hung up. I sat there in the dark hotel room feeling like I was drowning. Was Laura betraying me? With some guy named Micah? I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were starting to fit. Her late nights out, the hidden messages, the cold looks. I'd tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just stress, that Laura was still the wife I loved. But Ethan's words were a slap, waking me from my blind delusion. The next few days in Seattle were a nightmare. I went to meetings, talked to investors, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, hoping it was Ethan, but dreading worse news. I started noticing every detail in our video calls. Once I saw a strange jacket hanging in the living room, a black leather one, not mine. Another time, Ethan accidentally panned the camera to the window, and I glimpsed a black pickup truck parked outside, one I'd never seen before. I texted Laura, trying to sound normal. How are you? Is Ethan okay? But her replies were always short, cold. Everything's fine. Focus on your work. Each message from her made my blood boil. Then one night, Ethan sent me a text, just one line. Dad, he's here again. Attached was a short video. I opened it, my heart pounding. The footage was blurry, probably filmed from a hidden corner of the living room. I saw Laura wearing a tight red dress, laughing loudly with a man. He was tall, dressed in a black t-shirt, his arms covered in tattoos, snakes, skulls, and strange symbols. He leaned down, whispering something in Laura's ear, and she laughed, placing a hand on his chest. That gesture hit me like a hammer. I replayed the video over and over, each time a fresh stab of pain in my chest. But what chilled me to the bone wasn't just their intimacy. It was the man's face. He had scars on his cheek, one long gash running from his temple to his chin like he'd been slashed. His eyes were sharp, cold, not the eyes of an ordinary lover. There was something dangerous about him. I gripped the phone, my mind reeling. This wasn't just betrayal, this was a potential threat. I couldn't stay in Seattle any longer, but I needed to know more. I opened my laptop, went to the FBI and U.S. Marshals websites and searched their most wanted lists. I didn't know what I was looking for, just a gut feeling guiding me. I entered the description: male, tall, around 35 to 40 years old, tattoos, facial scar. And then I found him. Micah Daniel Reed, 38, wanted for fraud, aggravated assault, and robbery. The photo matched the man in the video perfectly. Short black hair, a long scar on his cheek, a snake tattoo on his neck. My heart stopped. The man in my house, the one Laura was laughing with, was a dangerous criminal. I texted Ethan immediately. Son, be careful. Stay away from him, I'm coming home now. But Ethan didn't reply. I called, the phone rang, but no one answered. Panic burned through me. I cut my trip short, booking the earliest flight back to Dallas. On the plane, I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, about Laura, about Micah. He wasn't just my wife's lover, he was a threat. And I, the father, the husband, had let him walk into my home. The plane touched down at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport in the thick of night. I gripped the armrest, my heart pounding, my mind swirling with images of Ethan and Micah, the wanted criminal with his terrifying scars and tattoos. The last text I sent Ethan still went unanswered. I called again, the phone ringing endlessly with no response. Each passing second felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I had left my son in that house with a wife I no longer recognized and a dangerous man. I, David, who once thought I controlled everything, was now a powerless man racing against time to save my family. I bolted out of the airport, jumping into the first taxi I saw. "Highland Park, as fast as you can," I nearly shouted at the driver. He nodded, sensing the panic in my voice, and asked no questions. On the way, I checked my phone obsessively, hoping for a text, a call from Ethan, but the screen remained blank. I pictured my mansion, the white walls, the oak-shaded garden, once our sanctuary. Now it felt like a trap, holding my son captive with a criminal and a betraying wife. When the taxi stopped in front of the mansion's gate, I barely recognized my own home. The iron gate stood silent, the streetlights casting eerie shadows of swaying trees, as if whispering of some horrific secret. I paid the driver, stepped out, and immediately noticed something wrong. The front door was locked. I always left it unlocked when coming home, and Laura knew that. I knocked, calling out loudly, "Laura! Ethan! Open the door!" No response, only the whistle of wind through the trees. Panic seared through me. I fumbled for my key, but the lock wouldn't budge. Someone had changed it. A chill ran down my spine. I pounded on the door harder, nearly frantic. "Laura! Ethan!" Then I heard it. A faint, desperate cry from inside, small but unmistakable. It was Ethan's voice. "Dad, help me!" Adrenaline surged through me. Without thinking, I ran to the back of the house, grabbing a large stone from the garden. The glass door to the living room was the weakest point. I hurled the stone, the crash of shattering glass piercing the night, shards scattering across the floor. I climbed through the broken frame, ignoring the sharp edges slicing into my hands. Blood dripped, but I felt no pain. Only one thought consumed me: save Ethan. The house was dark inside, lit only by the dim glow of hallway lights. I raced through the living room, past the leather chairs where we used to gather for movie nights, now empty and cold. Ethan's cry for help echoed again from upstairs. I sprinted up the staircase, my heart pounding like it would burst. At the second-floor hallway, I heard Laura's voice. Not the gentle one I once loved, but a cold, cruel tone. "That's what you get for betraying your mother," she said, each word like a blade. I shoved open the door to the master bedroom, the room where Laura and I once shared dreams and vows of love. The sight before me froze me in place. Ethan was tied to a chair, ropes binding his wrists and ankles tightly. His face was pale, his eyes red from crying, but they lit up when he saw me. "Dad!" he screamed, his voice choked with sobs. Laura stood a few steps away, wearing a tight red dress, her blonde hair disheveled. Beside her was Micah, the man from Ethan's video, tall, covered in tattoos, with a long scar across his cheek. He held a knife, its blade glinting silver under the light. He looked at me, his eyes cold as a snake's, and smirked. "So the husband's back," he said, his voice low and menacing. I didn't look at Micah. My eyes locked on Laura. "Laura, what are you doing?" I roared, my voice trembling with rage and pain. "This is our son. What are you letting him do to Ethan?" Laura turned, her eyes devoid of warmth, filled instead with contempt, as if I were a failure not worth her attention. "You wouldn't understand, David," she said, her voice like ice. "You're always busy abandoning me and Ethan. Micah gives me what you never could." Her words hit like a punch to the face. I wanted to scream that I'd done everything for our family, that I'd sacrificed everything to keep this mansion, to give her and Ethan a good life. But there was no time. Ethan was there, tied up, and Micah was advancing toward me, the knife gleaming in his hand. "Let my son go," I growled, stepping forward, heedless of the danger. "Touch him and I'll kill you." Micah laughed as if I were a joke. "What do you think you can do, you failed businessman? This house, your wife, it's all mine now." He swung the knife not to strike but to intimidate, but I didn't back down. I charged, shoving Laura aside, and tackled Micah. We grappled, and I grabbed his wrist, trying to stop the blade. He was stronger than I expected, his muscles like cold steel. I heard Ethan yell, "Dad, be careful!" Laura stood there, doing nothing, watching with vacant eyes. She didn't stop Micah, didn't protect Ethan. She had chosen him a criminal over her own family. With all my strength, I shoved Micah against the wall. The knife clattered to the floor, but he reacted quickly, landing a hard punch to my chest, making me stagger. Pain spread, but I didn't stop. I grabbed the knife, pointing it at him. "You won't touch my son," I snarled. At that moment, red and blue lights flashed through the window. Police sirens wailed, close enough to shake the house. Micah cursed, glancing outside, then back at me, his eyes burning with hatred. "You called the cops?" he shouted. I didn't answer, just held the knife steady, shielding Ethan. The front door burst open and police stormed in, guns aimed at Micah. "Hands up, now!" an officer yelled. Micah hesitated, but his eyes showed he knew he was cornered. He slowly raised his hands, not without a glare that promised revenge. The police cuffed him and dragged him out. Another officer approached me, his voice calm but firm. "We got a tip about a wanted fugitive here. Micah Daniel Reed, right? He's a dangerous criminal, wanted for fraud, assault, and robbery." I nodded, still in shock. I didn't know who had called the police. Maybe a neighbor heard the glass break, or Ethan had managed to reach out before being tied up. I didn't care. All that mattered was Ethan was safe. I rushed to my son, cutting the ropes with Micah's knife. Ethan threw himself into my arms, sobbing. "Dad, I was so scared, I thought I'd never see you again." I held him tightly, feeling his small body tremble. "I'm here, son. I won't let anyone hurt you again." Laura stood there, her face pale, eyes wide with panic. When the police mentioned Micah's true identity, she stumbled as if slapped. He's a criminal?" she stammered, her voice shaking. Then she turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "David, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I only wanted Micah to scare Ethan. You have to believe me." I looked at her, the woman I once loved more than myself. But now, I saw a stranger. She had let a criminal into our home, stood by while he tied up our son, and spoken cruelly to Ethan. "Laura," I said, my voice cold, "you chose him. You betrayed me, betrayed Ethan. I have nothing left to say to you." She collapsed, sobbing, begging for forgiveness. "David, don't leave me. I was wrong. I'm sorry. We can start over." But I shook my head, pulling Ethan to his feet and walking out of the room. I couldn't look at her for another second. My love for Laura had died the moment I saw her stand by while our son was tied up, doing nothing. The police took Micah away, and an officer stayed to take my statement. I recounted everything: Ethan's video, the information I found on the FBI website, and what had just happened. Ethan sat beside me, clutching my hand as if afraid I'd vanish. He had seen too much, faced fears no child should endure. I blamed myself for not coming home sooner, for trusting Laura too much, for letting my son fall into danger. As the police left, dawn broke. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the broken windows, illuminating the debris-strewn floor. The luxurious mansion, once my pride, was now a wreck, not because of the shattered glass or scattered furniture, but because my family was broken. I hugged Ethan, whispering, "I'm sorry, son. I let things go too far." Ethan looked up, his eyes still red but resolute. "It's not your fault, Dad. I just want to be with you." His words choked me up. I knew that despite everything falling apart, I still had Ethan, and I would do anything to protect him, to rebuild our lives. But first I had to face Laura and what was left of our marriage. The days that followed were an emotional storm. Laura didn't stay in the mansion. After the police took Micah away, she left, saying she needed time to think. I didn't stop her. I couldn't look into her eyes without seeing her standing by while Ethan was tied up, without recalling the harsh words she spoke to our son. Every time I thought about it, a surge of anger mixed with profound pain welled up inside me. I had loved Laura, had spent 11 years building a family with her, but she had destroyed it all with her callousness and betrayal. I took Ethan to stay temporarily with my mother in the Dallas suburbs for a few days, to shield him from the horrific memories tied to the mansion. My mother, with her silver hair and worried eyes, held Ethan tightly, whispering words of comfort. But I could see he was still quiet, his eyes carrying a sadness no 10-year-old should bear. I made a silent vow to myself. I would do everything to bring back his smile. A week after the incident, I decided to file for divorce. I met with my lawyer, James, a middle-aged man with a deep voice and sharp eyes. "David," he said, "are you sure you want to go through with this? Divorce will be complicated, especially with assets like the mansion." "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "Laura is no longer my wife. She betrayed me, betrayed Ethan. I just want this over and to protect my son." James nodded, jotting something down. "You need to brace yourself. Laura might demand a share of the assets, and the $10 million mansion will be a big target. Do you want to keep it?" I thought about the mansion, the white walls, the oak garden, the happy memories now tainted. It had been my dream, but now it was just a reminder of failure. "If I have to split assets to end things with Laura, I will," I said. "But I want Ethan safe, in an environment free from her shadow." James nodded, promising to prepare everything for the court. But deep down, a nagging worry lingered. Laura wasn't one to give up easily. She had changed, but I knew her. Sharp, determined, and sometimes ruthless. She would fight for what she wanted, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face her. The court date arrived faster than I expected. That morning, I stood before the mirror, adjusting my tie, trying to hide the exhaustion on my face. Ethan sat at the dining table wearing his favorite blue shirt, looking at me with eyes both anxious and trusting. "Dad, will everything be okay today?" he asked, his voice small but steady. I smiled, though my heart was heavy. "Everything will be fine, son, I promise. You don't have to go to court, but if you want, I'll take you." Ethan nodded. "I want to go. I want to be with you." I took his hand, feeling the small but strong grip of my son. He had been through so much, and I knew his presence would give me the strength to face Laura. The Dallas courtroom was cold, with stark white walls and rigid wooden chairs. Laura sat across the room, dressed in a simple black dress, but her eyes remained icy. She didn't look at me or Ethan, only at the judge, as if trying to maintain a facade of calm. Her lawyer, a young woman with a sharp voice, stood and presented Laura's demands: an equal share of the assets, including the $10 million mansion and custody of Ethan. Hearing that, I clenched my fists under the table. Custody of Ethan? She dared to ask for that after what she'd done? I glanced at Ethan beside me, his eyes filled with anger but also resolve. I knew he would never agree to live with Laura, not after what he'd witnessed. James stood, countering calmly but incisively. "Your Honor," he said, "Mrs. Laura committed marital infidelity, allowed a wanted criminal into their home, and was complicit in endangering their son, Ethan. We request that the court deny her demands for asset division and custody, as she is no longer fit to be a mother." The courtroom fell silent, save for faint whispers from the back. Laura bowed her head, but I saw her hands clench, as if restraining her anger. Her lawyer stood, her voice rising. "Your Honor, my client was unaware of the man's criminal history. She was a victim of deception. She has a right to her share of the marital assets, especially the mansion where she lived for 11 years. My blood boiled. A victim? Laura was no victim. She chose Micah, let him into our home, stood by while he tied up Ethan. I wanted to stand and scream at her, but James put a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Stay calm, David. Let the court handle it." The judge, an older man with a stern gaze, asked both sides to present further evidence. I recounted everything: Ethan's video, the FBI information about Micah, and the horrific scene in the mansion that night. When questioned, Laura repeated that she didn't know Micah was a criminal, that she was lonely because I was always away. But her voice trembled and her eyes wavered. She knew she was wrong, but she wasn't truly remorseful. After reviewing the evidence and statements, the judge spoke, his voice loud and clear. "Regarding custody, given Mrs. Laura's actions and behavior, her request for custody post-divorce is unacceptable. As for the assets, specifically the $10 million house, the court recognizes that Mrs. Laura has legal rights and obligations concerning the division of marital property. Therefore, she is entitled to a portion of the asset's value under the law. I felt this was fair enough. As long as Ethan stayed with me, that was all that mattered. The division of assets no longer felt important. But then, Ethan suddenly stood up. The small 10-year-old boy spoke clearly and boldly, stunning the courtroom. "Your Honor," he said, "the mansion Mom wants to split isn't marital property. That house has belonged to me for a long time." I stared at Ethan, shocked, speechless. Laura turned, her eyes wide as if she couldn't believe her ears. "Ethan, what are you saying?" she asked, her voice shaking. Ethan looked straight at the judge, unafraid. 8 years ago, my mom and dad transferred ownership of the mansion to me. They said it was to protect the asset in case Dad's business ran into trouble. Then he turned to me, his voice gentle. "Dad, don't you remember you used to tell me about it years ago?" The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge frowned, asking Ethan to elaborate. I felt like a bear waking from a long hibernation. 8 years ago? I racked my brain, and then, like a bolt of lightning, it hit me. When my company was thriving, a financial advisor suggested transferring the mansion's ownership to Ethan as a safeguard against business risks. Laura and I had agreed, thinking it was a minor legal formality. But with the pressures of work, I'd forgotten. Laura, it seemed, had too. "James," I whispered, "he's right. I have the documents." James nodded, immediately requesting permission to present evidence. The judge ordered a recess. I sped to my office, rifled through my safe, and as expected found the transfer documents from 8 years ago, complete with Laura's and my signatures. I raced back to the courthouse. When I handed the papers to the judge, Laura nearly screamed, "That's impossible! That's my house! I never agreed to this!" But the documents didn't lie. The judge reviewed them carefully, then declared, "The mansion in Highland Park, Dallas is legally owned by Ethan, not marital property. Mrs. Laura's request for asset division is denied. Regarding custody, based on the events, the court awards full custody of Ethan to Mr. David." Laura burst into tears, collapsing into her chair, covering her face. "David, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. I'm sorry, I don't want to lose everything." I looked at her, but all I felt was disappointment. "Laura," I said, my voice calm but cold, "you lost everything the night you let Micah tie up Ethan. You chose him, chose your selfishness over our son. Now you have to pay the price." Ethan spoke up softly, his voice cutting through the tense air. "Mom, I wish you happiness. Dad and I will be fine. Don't worry." I took Ethan's hand and led him out of the courtroom. Laura was still crying, calling my name, calling Ethan's, but I didn't look back. Ethan held my hand tightly, walking with a resolve I didn't expect from a 10-year-old. As we stepped out of the courthouse, Dallas's bright sunlight poured down, but the storm in my heart had passed. I looked at Ethan, and he looked back, giving me a small smile, the first I'd seen since that horrific night. We returned to the mansion. The broken glass had been cleared, but the air inside still felt heavy. I stood in the living room, looking out at the oak garden through the new glass window. "You and I won't let anyone hurt us again," I said, my voice soft but certain. Ethan nodded, standing beside me. "I know, Dad. I just need you." I hugged him, feeling my heart slowly warm again. Laura had lost everything, not just the mansion, not just her family, but her dignity. She left the courthouse empty-handed, carrying the shame of her affair with a wanted criminal. But Ethan and I, we still had each other. And that was all that mattered. The first few weeks after the trial were an eerie quiet. The mansion, still splendid with its white walls and Spanish-style red-tiled roof, no longer felt like a home. Every corner stirred memories. Laura's laughter as we painted the living room together, cozy family movie nights, and the haunting image of Ethan tied up, his eyes filled with fear. I wanted to leave, to sell the mansion and start anew somewhere untainted by the past. But whenever I looked at Ethan, I saw that he still loved this house. To him, it wasn't just property, it was the place where he'd fought to protect us, where he'd proven his strength. "Dad, I don't want to leave," Ethan said one afternoon as we sat in the backyard under the oak tree's shade. He held a stick, drawing circles in the dirt. "This house is ours. Mom may have done wrong, but I want to keep it, to remember that we got through it all." His words choked me up. Ethan, though only 10, was more mature than I'd realized. He wasn't just a child needing protection, he was the one who'd saved me, reminding me of the strength of family. "All right, son," I said, ruffling his hair. "We'll stay, but we'll make this house our own." I started with small changes. I hired painters to cover the cold white walls with warm hues, soft yellow, beige, and olive green. I replaced all the glass doors and windows, unwilling to let any shards from that horrific night remain. Ethan and I rearranged the living room together, hanging his school artwork and adding a new bookshelf for the science books he loved. The mansion slowly took on a new life, no longer Laura's shadow, but a place that belonged to Ethan and me. My business, after months of spiraling downward, showed signs of recovery. The grueling business trips had planted seeds for new connections. A month later, an investor from Seattle who'd once been skeptical called me. "David," he said, his voice deep but friendly, "I reviewed your plan. I think we can work together. Send me a detailed proposal and we'll get started." I could hardly believe my ears. After months of despair, this was the first glimmer of hope. I dove into work not for ambition or fame anymore, but for Ethan. I wanted him to see his father wasn't a failure, that I could rise from the ashes. I worked from home in the small upstairs office to stay close to Ethan. Each evening, as he did homework at the dining table, I sat across from him, checking emails and chatting about school or his dream of becoming a scientist. But not every day was easy. Some nights I woke drenched in sweat, haunted by dreams of Laura's cold stare in the living room or Micah's gleaming knife. Ethan had his quiet moments too, sitting alone in the backyard staring into the distance. I knew he was still haunted by what happened. Once I caught him looking at the video he'd secretly recorded of Laura and Micah. "I just wanted to make sure it's really over," he said, his voice trembling. I hugged him, whispering, "It's over, son. I'm here and I won't let anyone hurt you again." To help Ethan cope, I took him to see a therapist. Mrs. Anna, an older woman with a gentle voice, helped him express the emotions he'd buried. After a few sessions, I noticed him smiling more, sharing funny stories from school. "You know, Dad," he said one day as we walked Max, "Mrs. Anna says I'm really strong. I protected you, didn't I?" I stopped, looking into his eyes. "You didn't just protect me, Ethan, you saved me. Without you, I don't know where I'd be." He grinned, a bright smile I hadn't seen in too long. "So we're a team, right?" "Absolutely," I said, squeezing his hand, "an unbeatable team." Our lives slowly found a rhythm. My company secured a new contract with the Seattle investor, and the red numbers on the balance sheets began to fade. I no longer had to travel constantly, leaving Ethan behind. I spent more time with him, taking him to basketball games, doing science experiments in the backyard, or simply reading together under the warm glow of a lamp. The mansion, once a gilded cage, became a place filled with laughter and hope. But Laura didn't entirely vanish from our lives. One day, months after the trial, I received a letter from her. No return address, just a white envelope with her familiar handwriting. I opened it, my heart racing, unsure what to expect. The letter was brief, but each word cut deep. "David, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I was wrong, led astray by loneliness, and I hurt you and Ethan. I'm not asking you to take me back. I know that's impossible. But I want you to know I regret it. I'm trying to rebuild my life somewhere far away. Please take care of Ethan. He's the best thing we ever had. Laura." I read the letter, then folded it, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to erase Laura forever. But another part, the one that still remembered our happy days, felt a pang of pity. She had paid a price, losing her family, the mansion, her dignity. I didn't forgive her, but I no longer hated her either. I just wanted to move forward. I didn't show Ethan the letter, he didn't need more wounds, but I told him his mother had written that she was trying to start over. He nodded, saying nothing, but his eyes told me he was ready to leave the past behind. Our story doesn't end here. Life goes on with new challenges, sunny days and rainy ones too. But I know that as long as Ethan is by my side, I can face anything. The mansion, my business, the scars in my heart, they're all part of our journey. And together, Ethan and I will keep writing our story.